Hi everyone, my name is Jonas Helfer. I am an engineer at MDG where I work on open source projects including Meteor and Apollo, our new GraphQL data stack. Today I want to do a quick tour of GitHub's new GraphQL API. And I think by the end of it you'll love it even if you haven't seen GraphQL yet, and you'll probably want to give it a try yourself. I didn't know much about GitHub's API before I started trying it out yesterday, and it's really amazing how GraphQL, which is self-documenting, makes it easy to discover an API even if you don't know much about it yet. So GitHub has a new API. They announced it 2 days ago at their GitHub Universe conference, and they wrote a blog post about it. I put the link in the description so you can read all about it there. I also wrote a quick summary blog post of why that matters, what their API looks like, how you can use it, and what you should expect next. So link is also in the description for that. If you don't know GraphQL yet, so GraphQL is a query language, as an application query language that was open sourced by Facebook last year. They've been using it at Facebook for over 4 years, but they only open sourced it last year. And it really sort of removes some of the pain points of REST. So it's much more a replacement for REST than it is something similar to SQL. So maybe the term query language can be a little bit confusing, but that's not what I want to talk about today. If you want to learn more about GraphQL, you can go to the GraphQL.org website, which is also in the links. And that was actually the GraphQL.org website was just sort of got a complete makeover. So if you've seen it in the past, definitely go check it out again. It has a lot of great resources. And and GraphQL actually is now officially considered production ready by Facebook. So if that's been keeping you from using GraphQL in the past, do give it another try. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about today. I just want to do a quick tour of the API actually. So I now wrote the blog post yesterday. I wanted to look at the features, but I felt that I couldn't actually really adequately show all the things that you can do with the API. So I figured it would be better to make a video to actually show you like how cool it is. I'm gonna go pretty fast in this video, but you can always like slow it down or go back and rewatch it. And my typing speed is pretty slow, so you'll probably be fine. So if you want to try out GitHub's new GraphQL API, you're going to have to sign their pre-release agreement. There's also a link in their blog post that takes you to it. I think I'll post another link in the description. And that'll take you to their GitHub Developer Early Access page where you can read how to sign up for the early access program, how to get OAuth tokens, how to query their GraphQL endpoint with whatever HTTP clients you have and whatnot. And there's also some documentation here. I'm not going to look at that though because you can do that yourself. Today I'm just going to use the GraphQL Explorer, which is basically graphical. If you've heard about that before. It's sort of a UI for running GraphQL queries. It's kind of also this self-contained documentation explorer for GraphQL. So you can kind of explore the API and run queries at the same time. It's pretty cool. So actually when you get to the page, it's going to look like this. You're going to have to sign in with GitHub, accept like a bunch of permissions, which, hopefully you trust GitHub with your GitHub account or GitHub permissions. The reason they ask for these permissions is because you can actually modify stuff through this API. So we'll see that in a second. All right, so let's get started. So this is graphical. Here on the left, we have a query. Down here, you can put in variables. We don't need these just quite yet. And on the right side, you're going to see the result. So I'm going to just run this very simple query here, which basically is going to get my GitHub login. So that's cool. Over here on the right side, we can see the documentation. There's query and mutation. So let's look at queries first. So we can do the pretty common thing for GraphQL APIs. We can query nodes, which is basically a single object or a list of nodes. I'm going to skip over this one. This is kind of a workaround for a limitation in Relay. Repository owner, kind of you can get an organization or a user and then start looking at their repositories. Viewer is basically yourself. So here, in my case, this is me. So that's my login. There's other stuff I can look at here. For example, my, what do I want to look at? Company, what does it say? Is that a string? Yeah, that's a string. Okay, I can also go deeper, actually. I can be like, okay, let's look at followers. Or let's just look at the, actually, let's look at the count of followers or whatever. So you see, you can like kind of keep going deeper and nest. But that stuff is probably not so interesting. I always like stalking other people much more than looking at myself. So I'm gonna go for a repository owner here, and it wants a login. So we're gonna look at our own Apollo stack organization here. So what can we get here? We can get repositories, we can get a repository, we can get the login, we can get an ID, an avatar, URL. Let's just see, just to make sure it's working. Okay, that does seem to be working. So let's look at a single repository. What should we do? Let's look at Apollo client, because that's what I'm working on. All right, so you can get a repository here from repository owner. You can also get the list of all repositories, and that'll be paginated. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. And by the way, I'm opening this sort of autocomplete dialog with control space. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's like one of the really cool features of graphical. Is like it tells you everything you can do. And if the thing on the left, the autocomplete stuff doesn't help you, you can always go over here on the right and kind of the documentation and start exploring that. We'll see that later. So this is a repository. What do we want to look at? Let's look at maybe, okay, let's look at stargazers. All right. So this is like the list of people who've started. And here we have to, this can be a long list, so it's paginated. So we're going to go for like the first 10. And what are we going to get? So here, so when you have a paginated list here in their API, they use sort of this relay connection style, which means you always have to do edges and then nodes. But you'll get used to that pretty quickly. And then is the thing that you actually get to. So that's a stargazer here. So let's just get like, I don't know, login and company. And then you run that, and it'll give you 10 results. And you see here who started, like what company they work at. It's pretty cool. You can do the same thing for example, let's say you want to know who forked it. Let's just do that very quickly here. Forks. Okay, so you can get forks. And we'll do first 10. Okay, now I have an extra bracket here. First 10. So let's see. This gives you the total count. So this is not dependent on like how many you're querying for. So there's 66 total, and that can help you like paginate. So for example, you can get page info, which is like has next page, and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's go edges and node again. And then here, this is, I think, a repository, right? So let's look at the owner of the repository and get their login, right? So this is probably a user, right? So here we have a bunch of people who've cloned it. And if we want to know which company they're from, we'd like to see like company, right? So now I want to see company, but the thing is, it's not here because this owner here, if I look at what that actually is, this is a type repository owner. A repository owner is actually I think it's an interface, and so it has only one, or it has only these fields that are on it by default, and then these user and organization extended. And so the thing we're interested in now is a user, and so we have to have a way of telling GraphQL that this here, the thing that we're querying for, is a user, so that we can have access to all these fields. And the way you do that is with a fragment. So I'm going to use an inline fragment here. So I say this, and now I can still get the login, but I can also get the company, right? Which I wasn't able to do before. So let's look at that. So most people don't have a company here, but some people do. So we have Grove Labs, Adobe, Guild of Programmers, IBM. So yeah, so that was like a quick tour of like how you can dig deeper here, and where like in some cases you have to use fragments. If you do have to use a fragment, so here it doesn't tell you what type thing this is here, and so you might not be able to look it up, but you can always go like, you can always ask for type name here, and then you'll see this type name here is user, and so you know you have a user type, and then you can do ... on user, which makes your life easier. Then you don't actually have to go to the documentation and check that out. Yeah. Okay, what's next? Let's see. All right, so we can also do stuff like look at the commit history of a repo, and that'll get you into some like more nitty-gritty Git stuff. So we can do, the way to do that is you get a ref, a qualified name. Let's look at master. All right, and what can we do here? We can look at the target. I think target is the sort of the Git object that we're interested in. And here target, again, like this doesn't seem to have a lot of interesting things. We can get back to the repository, we can get the object ID, we can get the ID, but let's get the type name so we actually know what type of thing this is. And it's a commit, which kind of makes sense, right? Because we're looking. So we're going to do ... on commit. And then what can we get here? We can get the author, for example, and I think that gets you the login. No, okay, email. And we can get the commit message. And now I actually forgot to put I forgot to put the pagination information on there. Oh no, actually this is just the last commit, so this is going to be fine. So we see the last commit was from Sashko, who merged a pull request here. What we can do here as well on the commit, we can actually get the whole history of that commit, which is all the, like the lineage basically of this commit, where it came from, what came before it. So we can get the history here, and then we have to do edges nodes again. And oops. And here we can do author again. Name, was it name? Yes, name. Or no, let's get email. Or let's get name, whatever, doesn't matter. So we'll get the author name, and we'll get the commit message. Let's just get message here. And you see, like, you have a bunch of commits. You can also do something else, which is cool. You can get the tree, actually, which I think is pretty neat. So the tree will give you basically all the files that are associated with that commit. And entries is a tree entry. It was an array of tree entries. And this thing is actually not paginated, right? So if I do this, I'm going to get, for the last 10 commits, I'm going to get the tree with all the names of all the files that are in there. Yeah, which is pretty cool. So yeah, let's see what else you can do. So you can get the Git object again, and then you can like keep digging deeper. So yeah, that's a lot of stuff you can do, and I've like only scratched the surface here with queries. There's also some other cool thing which you can do, which is modify data, which is basically run mutations. So let's take a quick look at how that works. So the way you do that in GraphQL is basically you tell it that it's a mutation, and then let's see what we have for mutations. So you have add comment, add project card, add project column, add reaction, create project. There's a lot of project stuff here, and this is pretty cool because GitHub actually just recently introduced this project feature, and everything that you can do through their UI, I believe, you can also do through their GraphQL API. And this is actually pretty amazing for developers, because it means that for the first time, GitHub won't actually have to maintain two separate APIs, like one that's private and just used for them, and one that can be used by everyone. Like they'll have their public API, and that'll be the same one that they use internally, just with different permissions. So this is pretty cool, because it's going to mean that whenever they add a new feature, it's going to be available to people immediately. But most people aren't really familiar with the project thing yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a reaction, because who doesn't like emojis, right? So actually, to add a reaction, I need to know what I want to add a reaction to. So I'm going to go find our Apollo repo, where I've created an issue to test comments via GitHub's GraphQL API. You can actually also post comments via their API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try post a reaction on this first comment here in this thread. And so let's see how we would do that. So we'll go back to the to graphical here, and we'll say add reaction, right? And so as always, it tells you what it needs to be. And so this wants an input here, and input is, I think, an add reaction input. So let's go back to the mutation here. So you can take a look here. Mutation, we said add reaction. It's probably at the top somewhere. Add reaction here, and that takes an add reaction input, which is a GraphQL input type. So it wants a client mutation ID, which is just whatever random ID you want to give it. That doesn't really matter much. So you give it a string, then it wants a subject ID. And the subject ID is actually the ID of the comment here in this case. The thing is, though, the IDs used in the GraphQL API they're opaque, so you don't know, they don't correspond directly to this, right? So I can't just take this and post a comment on it without having first queried the API here. And then the content is actually pretty simple. It's a reaction content, which is an enum, so it can be thumbs up, thumbs down, laugh, hooray, confused, heart. Okay, so if I want to do this, I first need to figure out what the ID of this comment is. So I think by now you might actually know how to do this because we've kind of done it before. So we'll go through repository owner, which is still Apollo stack. Oh, that doesn't autocomplete, of course. So we'll still have Apollo stack here. We'll have a repository, which we said is Apollo. And then we're going to look at issues, and we're going to look at just the first one, because I think that was the first one. And oh yeah, so we have to go via edges and node, and then we're going to get the title. So that's obviously not the one, so maybe it's the last one, because it's the last one we posted. Yes, it is. Okay, so we don't just want the title, we want the comments. And here, I think we just want the first one. So edges, nodes again, it's a bit much. You don't always have to paginate like this in GraphQL. So this is just a convention that's used by the GitHub API here in this case. So what do I want to get? I want to get the content. No, what can I get here? Oh, body. It's called body here. Body. Okay, let's see. So this says testing a first comment with emoji. Ta-da! And this is the first comment. So I guess this comment here is not actually, this is the issue thing. So I could have gotten that directly here probably. Does that have a body? No, what does it have? Oh, this is issues, last one, edges node. So does this have a body? This does have a body, okay. So I could have posted a reaction on that, but I'm going to post a reaction on that first comment then, because that's going to make it a little bit easier for us here. So I need the ID of that, because that's going to be the subject ID that we give to the mutation. All right, so testing a first comment with emoji, and this here is a subject ID. So we're going to take that, and I just copied it, and we're going to do the mutation, add reaction, and we're going to give it an input. And here, actually, just for fun, I'm going to use a GraphQL variable here. So I'm gonna call this the test mutation, and it's going to have an input of add reaction, or like, was it add reaction input, and that's required. And then what am I going to get back? I'm going to get the reaction, And this is going to be content here. We'll just do that. And then down here, I can specify the variables, right? So I go here and I want to define the input. So it already auto-completes that for me, which is convenient sometimes, but also inconvenient some other times. So I'm going to do the client mutation ID, just going to give it 1, 2, 3. I'm going to use the subject ID, which is going to be the thing that I just copied here. And then I'm going to have the content, which I think has to be one of these enums. So what are we going to do with that? What kind of reaction do we want to add? Let's add a thumbs up. And you can try this yourself later. I'm going to pretty much copy paste this into a gist or something. Then you can try all these queries yourself. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I'm going to run this. And it says it worked, so I go here, and it does indeed have a thumbs up. So that's pretty cool. I don't think there's a way to remove a reaction yet through the GitHub GraphQL API, but I'm sure that's coming soon. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So I said it was going to be a quick tour, but I guess it took a little bit longer because there's so much to discover. And despite that, I've only scratched the surface. The schema is pretty huge, so if you click around here, it'll take you forever to find everything. And I've actually done one thing. I extracted the whole schema, and then I made a little gist of it, and it has about 3,000 lines. So I can search here for query, and I can see everything that it has there. And sometimes I use this just because I can see everything at once, and I can search and jump around. And yeah. So that's that. I'll also put the link to this gist in the description if you're curious, but most of the time you'll probably be fine just using the graphical documentation. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so using graphical or this GitHub GraphQL API Explorer is a really good way and a really fun way to learn about the API. If you want to see an example for how to write an app against it, because this doesn't really let you write an app. So if you want to see how to write an app against the GitHub GraphQL API, you can check out another link in the description. We just made an example app a couple days ago, or my colleague Sashko Stabailo made an example app, and it's sort of a mobile issue reader, but with React Native that uses the GitHub GraphQL API, and so you can read issues and stuff. Yeah, if you want to contribute to that would be cool as well, because we want to add mutations and all of that. So it really should be a fully fledged mobile issue reader for GraphQL. Yeah, so there's a lot more to the GitHub GraphQL schema. I've really only just scratched the very top of the surface. I'm really psyched. This is a really, really, really awesome way to discover their API. I didn't know GitHub's API or REST API before that. But I bet that if I'd wanted to do all the things that I just did now, it would have taken me a lot longer to read their documentation, go try sending requests and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, if you go and do some cool stuff with it, go ahead and write it in the comments on this video, or just tweet about it, or you can tweet at me and I'll retweet it at helfer.js. Which has nothing to do with JavaScript. It was just the name was taken and I used my initials. Yeah, if you have ideas for how to improve the API, and I'm sure you'll have lots because it's still pretty early access, pretty basic, you should head over to the early access forum of GitHub and post those comments there. And yeah, if you're excited about GraphQL, or as excited as I am, then also go and check out the stuff that we're building with it for Apollo. We have a pretty awesome GraphQL client called Apollo Client, and a lot of other projects like tools and servers, code generators for Swift, and I think adding Android as well. And we have integrations for Angular and React, and a super active and really welcoming community. So come and join us. Be active, or you can if you just want to hang out and ask questions, we also have a Slack channel, and all those links are in the description below. All right, Okay, then I hope you enjoyed this quick tour and hope to see you in the next video.